So today, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 4 agreements that leaders can make daily to improve their connection with teammates, their effectiveness as a leader, their development of the culture they are trying to create with their team or their organization. Today's podcast is inspired by the book, The 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. I'll just give you a quick synopsis of the book, The 4 Agreements. It's based on ancient Toltec wisdom. Ruiz highlights self-limiting beliefs and also offers a simple, but again, not easy, and powerful code of personal conduct that transforms us into more happiness, more love, and connection. And today we're going to look at those 4 agreements from the perspective of leading your team and your culture in today's world.
Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world.
Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Season 5 is off and running. We are well over 90 episodes, and again, I just say thank you to everybody out there because the excitement, the energy, all of this continues to grow, and I'm so happy and grateful for that. That these messages and these anecdotes and these daily, weekly mantras are helping everybody navigate their way through their own life, their own work, the culture they're trying to create. So really, really excited to continue to share these thoughts and glad that they are adding value to you. As always, I want this to be a place where you are able to step back in your day, in your week, in your month, and to think, to be filled with positive thoughts and also some things that nudge you back to that culture that you're trying to create in your life and for the person that you're hoping to show up in your life and work. So I'm more convinced in this than ever that, authentic leaders and creating compelling cultures are as important as ever in the world. And so the teams, the leaders, the organizations that are focused on that are navigating their way through all these challenges better than those that aren't. So before we dive into today's episode, if you will do me a quick favor, 1 minute, to rate this podcast, 5 stars, of course, and any other podcast that you've listened to as a part of these different seasons. If you can quickly do that, that is super important, and rate the podcast as a whole, of course. And if you can leave a nice review, that is super helpful because that's the way the algorithms recognize these things and help share it so that more and more people can find this podcast. And also share it with the people in your life and work that ought to be a part of this. This is the way that these messages amplify further into the world, and I'm very grateful for everybody that takes the time to do that. Thank you very much. This season, we've been talking about navigating the future of work. We've been talking about things like the big shift, the great resignation, this concept of the future of work, work-life balance. We've been talking about trends and data that is emerging, that the challenges that teams and organizations are in the workforce are experiencing, and social dilemmas and all the things that are happening in the world around us. But we've also been talking about emotional intelligence, and we've been talking about the types of leadership mindsets, and we've been talking about in this environment that the cultures we create are perhaps the most important things we can do, and that in fact many people out there in the world are searching for more meaningful cultures. And so we as leaders and as a part of teams and organizations and cultures, we play an enormous role on helping people find a place and create these spaces that are more meaningful people, which does, in fact, in my opinion, change the world. So we're going to continue talking. And so today, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 4 agreements. We're going to be talking about not the only agreements, but we're going to be talking about 4 agreements that leaders can make daily to improve their connection with teammates, their effectiveness as a leader, their development of the culture they are trying to create with their team or their organization. We're going to be focused on those. What are 4 agreements that maybe we could make to ourselves and to the people around us that would have that kind of impact on our own effectiveness, on our own development, and for that culture of the people around us? So every so often, if you're like me, you find this, that every so often in the world, there are times where we just need to go back to a certain book or a certain text. You need to go back to hearing words, and sometimes you hear words differently, and they land on you depending on different times that you're reading them. Well, today's podcast is inspired by the book, The 4 Agreements, by Miguel Ruiz. And this is a fabulous book that resonated with me the first time that I read it. And we'll put the 4 Agreements book by Miguel Ruiz. We'll put that in the show notes so that you can find it. But it resonated with me the first time I read it, and but then it's one of those books where, with the times that we've been in lately, where so many challenges, certainly trauma people have been experiencing, anxiety and stress and obstacles in front of us, but also all kinds of opportunities to build the types of teams and cultures that bring out the best in the people around us. As we're in those times too, it was a great book to pull back out and just return to some of the simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy, and powerful language that Miguel Ruiz shares in his book, The 4 Agreements. So I'm going to focus on some of that language, but I'm going to then give my own spin on what does this mean in terms of leading in the world today and the culture that we're trying to create with the people around us. And so from some of Miguel's 4 Agreements language, what do we do with that, and how can those be tips for us along the way? And so, but I'll just give you a quick synopsis of the book, The 4 Agreements. It's based on ancient Toltec wisdom. Ruiz highlights self-limiting beliefs and also offers a simple, but again, not easy, and powerful code of personal conduct that transforms us into more happiness, more love, and connection. And today we're going to look at those 4 agreements from the perspective of leading your team and your culture in today's world. So we'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break and take a pause, get our mind right, and then we'll be right back to focus on the 4 agreements. Hey everyone, I'm excited to share with you that Thermostat Cultures Live, the event, is coming back Friday, October 29th, 2021. As many of you know, this event that I've hosted over the last 5 years has been an inspiring day of development focused on authentic leadership and creating compelling cultures. I've been joined by powerful voices like Howard Behar, former president of Starbucks, Shane Battier, 2-time NBA champion, Jenny Britton, founder of Jenny's Ice Cream, Jessica Jackley, co-founder of Kiva, Cameron Mitchell from Cameron Mitchell Restaurants, Greg Oden, former NBA #1 draft pick, and on and on and on. This year, Thermostat Cultures Live is going to be a hybrid event. There's going to be a powerful VIP in-person experience with limited seating in Columbus, Ohio, and a virtual experience for those wanting to participate remotely. So please visit thermostatcultureslive.com, thermostatcultureslive.com, or jasonvbarger.com to learn more, and I hope you'll consider joining this as an individual or as an entire team. I hope you'll help share the word and join these conversations that are the currency for change. So the 4 agreements that Miguel Ruiz shares, and again, I'm going to share the main language with you because I think it's language that we needed to return to. I know I needed to return to, but then I'm going to fill in my own context for what I think this means and how to help give some words to this, that what does this mean for how we lead and the culture we create in the world today. The first agreement that Miguel Ruiz talks about is be impeccable with your word. Be impeccable with your word. And remember, these 4 agreements is our own personal agreements we make first to ourselves, our own personal kind of code of conduct to say, hey, as I show up each day, what if I could do these 4 things and make these 4 agreements to myself and to the people around us? And they, again, may sound simple, but it doesn't mean they're easy. And yet, they are powerful and can transform us into a different way of thinking, acting, and interacting with the people around us. So the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. And what this means, at least to me, and what I think this means as we think about leading and creating culture in the world today, is to speak with integrity, to say only what you mean. To be impeccable with your word is to say things not just to fill time, not just to fill air, not just to agree with somebody, even when you may not, to say only what you mean. To avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about other people. What if we could be impeccable with our word by avoiding to speak against someone or to gossip about somebody else? Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. And so as leaders, the words we share are powerful. The words we share are powerful. If people see them as a smokescreen, or people see your words as fake, or see them as you're telling us just what we want to hear, then authenticity is lost. And so we want to make sure that our words aren't just smoke screens. They aren't just fake. They aren't telling somebody just what we think they want to hear, because authenticity is lost in the midst of that. But the best leaders are impeccable with their word, which means they say only what they mean. And the best leaders don't gossip. They use words to connect, to build bridges with each other rather than walls between people. And so they use words to connect, to care, and to provide truth, even when that truth might be difficult. But be impeccable with your word. The second agreement is to don't take anything personally. Now, every time I hear that and I read that, and when I've returned to Miguel's book, I come to that part and say that is so much easier said than done. It's hard for us to not take things personally. But what if an agreement we could make to ourselves today is I'm going to be impeccable with my word, and I'm not going to take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. And oftentimes we think that other people's behavior is just because they're thinking about us, but oftentimes it's not. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream, their own vision, or they're all just caught up in the moment of what they are experiencing. When you are immune to the options and the actions of others, you won't then be the victim of needless suffering. And so as leaders, it's often difficult to not take things personally, because if something's not going well or something on the team, there's angst or challenges or struggles that oftentimes we as the leader, we take it personally, like our teams are supposed to be perfect or nothing's ever supposed to go wrong. But we need to be able to separate ourselves that sometimes people are just having challenges or they are seeing it through their own lens, and it's not about us. And so we don't need to take it personally. And I know this is difficult again, but as leaders, we need to be able to step back and say, okay, I'm not going to take this personally. And it's difficult to not defend, to jump into a situation when we feel like we begin to take it personally. It's easy to get defensive or to try to explain or to make excuses in some way, but really to step back, to take a deep breath and say, I'm not going to take this personally. But I'm going to recognize and try to give others space and realizing that it's coming from somewhere else. And most times it's not about you. And so once I and we and you can get past this, it's not about me, let me not take this personally, then I can be able to also make the next agreement with myself, which is don't make assumptions. So be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings and sadness and drama. Of course, we want to do that. We want to find the courage to ask questions and to express what we really want. And we want to make sure that we're communicating with others as clearly as we can to avoid misunderstandings or sadness or drama that may come from misspoken words. With just this one agreement, we can completely transform our lives and the lives of other people around us. Let's just don't make assumptions. As soon as we begin to find our brains going down that path, the narrative of assuming that we know what they're feeling or thinking, or we know what their experience is, or we know what the outcome is going to be, as soon as we find ourselves going that path, let's just step back and to say, I'm not going to go that route. I'm not going to make any assumptions. As leaders, clarity is king. Clarity is king. And so oftentimes we need to not make assumptions, but step back and to return to what is our mission? Are we clear about that purpose and mission of why we're here and what we're trying to accomplish? What is that vision? And is there clarity for where it is we're trying to go individually and collectively as a team or as an organization? Third, are we clear on our values? Not just what we do, but how we're committed to doing it, how we are committed, that the covenant we make with one another of how we're committed to showing up to do the work as a team. And then lastly, is our strategy clear? Meaning, do we know what we're are our actions and behaviors and strategic plans, are they in alignment with that mission, the vision, and the values? Are expectations and roles clear? And is your care for the human beings on your team and around you, is that clear? So in a world where many people jump to assumptions, as leaders, clarity is king. Clarity around mission, clarity around vision, clarity around values, and clarity around strategy. Are expectations and roles clear? And do people feel that you're not making assumptions about them, but you actually care for them as a human and the contribution they make to that mission, vision, values, and strategy? So be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. And lastly, and simply, but again, not easy, always do your best. Always do your best. And oftentimes, again, when I read that again, I'm like, okay, that seems pretty generic. That seems too simple. Like, okay, what? But the reality is, if I can make these 4 agreements, if I can be impeccable with my word today, if I can not take anything personally, if I don't make any assumptions of other people, and I make sure that things are clear then, and then I commit to saying, I'm going to always do my best, the impact that has on myself and the people around me is gigantic. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. We know that. But what does it mean? It will be different when you are healthy. You know, the times when I've been the healthiest in my life, that my best I'm capable of more often than I ever give myself credit for. And I know you are too. When we are healthy as individuals and as teams, we are capable of so much more than we often understand. And when we're experiencing times of unhealth, or times when we're feeling a little sick or a little down, or we're going through challenging times, maybe our best isn't our ultimate best, but in that moment, we also have the opportunity to say, what would my best for this moment look like? And under any circumstance, simply do your best. And you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret along the way, because if we can look ourselves in the mirror and say, did I do my best that I could do in that moment? Then we can walk away from things like self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. As leaders, we need to return to, well, what is that temperature that I'm committed to setting? Again, I'm not always at my best. I'm not always perfect. Nobody ever is. No human or team on the planet is. But I need to know, what is that temperature that I'm trying to set? What is that what does it look like for me to be at my best? And what is within my control in this moment? At a time and in a space when so much is out of our control, what does it look like for me to set a temperature and to do my best in this moment? What is the action and behavior that's needed rather than just focusing on the outcome? Rather than worrying about doing my best just so it can lead to an outcome, focus on what is the action and behavior to do my best and realize the outcome will follow. What is needed in this moment that is in front of me? Powerful agreement. Those 4 agreements I want us to think about and spend some time pondering, because those 4 agreements, again, be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. If we can show up with that mindset and then living that with action each day, the impact we will make on our own effectiveness for our own life and work that we're doing in the world, and certainly for the people around us, it will spread. Calibrating our own personal thermostat for our own awareness, our own response, and calibrating our social awareness of the people around us and developing the relationships of the people around us on our team. We realize that we are the thermostats. Our own internal temperature sets a temperature for people externally and for others based on our awareness, our response, our behaviors. The 4 agreements might seem simple, but they absolutely aren't easy. But they can transform how we show up and the feelings that others have around us. So as always, let me leave you with a few questions to ponder this week. How could you focus your energy and action on these 4 agreements in your life and work? How could you focus your energy and action on these 4 agreements in your life and work? To be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. How could you focus your energy and action on those 4 agreements in your life and work? What personal agreements would help you be more authentic, be more caring, and effective with those in your life and work? Do you have other personal agreements that ought to be added to the list for you? I hope you'll keep tuning in. The next episode is going to be a powerful conversation from last year's Thermostat Cultures Live virtual event. We're going to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and leadership actions that are needed in the world today. So it's going to be a great priming of the pump for this year's Thermostat Cultures Live event that's coming up on Friday, October 29th. You can learn more at thermostatcultureslive.com. But I look forward to and I hope you enjoy the next episode. Remember, the best leaders, teams, and cultures on the planet stimulate progress by recalibrating their thermostat together.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.